You're a little bit too square. Your right shoulder, you see, a little bit this way. It should be more this way. So when you're driving it, you're going to do real damage. You might drop the guy with one punch. But you aim it here and bring the same hand. When he hits here, he's liable to bring it down. Even if he's got his life, bring down, bang, over here. Bang, with the left hook here or here.
Ladies and gentlemen, this video is what I consider to be one of the greatest martial arts duos in all of history. Mike Tyson and Cus D'Amato. Every once in a while, a fighter comes along who can perfectly exemplify a system or a style of fighting. And Mike Tyson really is the ultimate expression of Cus D'Amato's peekaboo boxing. It is the perfect match between an intelligent genius mind to innovate boxing and then the ultimate physical capability to do it in Mike Tyson. So let's jump in. Let's look at some of the movements that Tyson shows, how we can learn from it, how it works for self-defense, and just how amazing it is to actually watch. Here we go.
Pow, pow. Inside fighting, yeah. Dangerous martial arts. Pow, pow. Ooh, ah.
So if you haven't guessed, I'm a peekaboo boxing fan, mainly because, okay, so let me just say this right off the bat. I think when you look at boxing, you have to look at it as a martial art. I hate that people just look at boxing like it's a sport. It is a sport, yes, but it is a sport with the intention to cause harm to the other person. It is an art of fighting. It is a martial art by definition, and it's a wonderful martial art. Arguably, boxing has some of the best qualities you can pick up for self-defense, in my opinion, just because of the footwork in boxing is so incredibly advanced. The fact that you're dealing with punches to your head, which is the primary thing in a street fight that you encounter when someone wants to hurt you, when someone's angry at you. What are they trying to do? They're trying to hit you as hard as they can in the face. That is human instinct. And boxing spends 100% of its time dealing with this, punches. Doesn't get overly complicated with numerous variables, with kicks, with elbows, with clinch. I'm not saying those things aren't absolutely necessary. In fact, I think they're wonderful. But there is something to say about the simplicity in the approach and the philosophy of boxing, that we're just going to use our hands and see who the better man is, which is, again, something subconscious, I think, in a lot of actual street fights. And you learn how to deal with it better than any martial art in the world. Now, within boxing, there's subsystems. If I was going to tell you karate, you'd say, okay, I can accept that with karate. I can accept that there's Goju-Ryu karate, Wado-Ryu, that there's Kyokushin, that there's all these different Shotokan. There's so many different systems of karate. Well, boxing kind of has the same thing in my view. Boxing has many styles and expressions throughout it. And it's very rare you find perfection. It's kind of a once in a lifetime thing where you find perfection of movement in any sport, in martial arts, in gymnastics, whatever that thing is. So when we find it, we should actually look at it, analyze it, appreciate it, and see what we can learn from it. So Mike Tyson, I got to tell you, he is just that. Now, right off the bat, peekaboo boxing, I think, is an incredibly unique system because of the various qualities it brings. What peekaboo boxing brings is a balanced, and I know a lot of people don't realize this, but it's an incredibly balanced system of incredible defense and incredible offense. Something about Cus D'Amato, and here we have the beast of Mike Tyson himself. You could just see that this guy just had pure aggression in him. But what peekaboo boxing gives you, again, is the quick ability to evade getting hit while closing distance on usually a bigger fighter. Everyone Tyson fought was bigger. And to decimate them because of the angles you create, because of the powers you generate through leverage, and because of how hard you are to get hit. Now, Cus D'Amato took in Tyson when he was 12 years old. As we see here, this guy was more than just a trainer for him. He was a father figure. And sadly, when Cus died, it took a lot away from Tyson. He was kind of lost. And I think that's what led to the decline of Tyson's peak era of boxing, especially when Don King stepped in and took advantage of him for money, which is, a whole other video in itself. But what Cus and Tyson accomplished together is incredibly beautiful. And I really think that we can learn so much from a self-defense perspective, because there's so many elements of peekaboo boxing that translate. So let's just look at how Tyson's moving here. The first thing that Tyson is doing, and I want to just come back to this, and this is something that Cus was totally serious about from the start, from day one. Cus's main philosophy with peekaboo boxing was two primary things: that your hands are always up by the side of your head. Now, for self-defense, this might not be the best hand placement. You might want to have it higher. You might want to have your hands a little different, maybe your elbows a little bit higher, but it doesn't matter because it's coupled with this incredible ability to never stop moving your head and create angles. And this is what people don't understand about peekaboo boxing and Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson was not just a great offensive fighter. He was arguably one of the best defensive boxers in all of boxing history. Mike Tyson rarely got hit because his hands were always here and his head was always moving and his levels were always changing. He kind of exemplified what weaving is better than anyone in that era. And if we look at this here, Cuss is capturing this right now. He's talking about how you got to keep your hands by your head. And Tyson, that was 90% of what made Tyson so... Okay, now here we have to pull that back because Tyson just covered distance. And this is a whole other point. So let me just... Too many things are going on here that are wonderful. So Tyson's ability, beyond just being incredibly defensive from here, was his ability to cover distance. And for a street fight, this is incredibly valuable. I talk about this a lot. You don't want to fight people in punching range where they're comfortable. In other words, if me and you were going to fight, I don't want you to be right here. I don't know if the camera could see, but right around here where your punch is in a perfect range to hit me. Something about, instinctive fighting is that people punch at range where they just naturally know how. It's very rare that people know how to fight up close and personal in the pocket. Peekaboo boxing is an amazing system for bridging the gap. And bridging the gap is a huge element of fighting. You'll see it in different styles. They refer to it differently, but let's say Jeet Kune Do, Wing Chun, even wrestling. All these systems involve you closing a distance, bridging a gap, and covering the area where you are most vulnerable to getting hit. Even though in wrestling there's no strikes, you still have to bridge that gap to be able to get face-to-face with the person. Okay, now that's a very hard thing to do. That's actually what allows the bigger, taller fighter to have an advantage in a fight, is that they can just jab at you, kind of keep you away. The incredible thing about peekaboo boxing and Mike Tyson's expression of peekaboo boxing is the ability to cover distance without getting hit in such an explosive, fast manner. And again, it's a combination of those things. It's a combination of your hands up, your head constantly moving, and every time his head moves, there is a step forward with a slight change in angle. In other words, he's not coming straight at you. He's zigzagging at you. So it's almost impossible to hit him, literally, because the hands are there. So even if you can get your eyes on him, which in my opinion is physically impossible, he's moving too fast, his head is moving like a blur from side to side, and his feet are covering so much distance every time he slips that it's almost impossible, even if he's 10 feet away, to stop him in 1 second from being right here. And if you're the bigger fighter who's used to using your jab or used to using range, or if you're in a street fight where the element or the psychology is that you just want to hurt this person, you just want to kind of punch him, and the guy's over here in 1 second, that is arguably one of the best skills you can have. I always talk about it, the rhino, right? So a lot of what I teach is you just go from here, you act kind of passive, you act like the victim so that they get comfortable moving forward. So when they move forward, you move forward into them and you take that space. Tyson was doing that better than anyone. He was stealing your space away from you. He was suffocating you with incredible speed and movement. And his head movement and his abilities to cut angles are just absolutely astonishing here. And the amazing thing that Cuss also taught was that when you slip, you use that leverage. You see here, he's using his jab a lot. We'll get into that more, but you use the leverage of the slip to generate more power. And here's some other fighters. People don't know this, but Cus D'Amato trained numerous champions. He didn't just train Mike Tyson. He trained Floyd Patterson. He trained Jose Torres. And he had a very tall fighter, Joey Hadley, who used peekaboo boxing as well in a very unique way. And there'll be some footage of him after, but the notion that peekaboo boxing can't work for numerous body types is a misconception, because the principles, the elements of it are consistent against anyone. It doesn't matter on their size. It doesn't matter on their height. These are sound self-defense principles, which is interesting in boxing because boxing has to be exciting. And Cus D'Amato actually talked about that. He said that what makes a great boxer is a boxer who doesn't get hit, who inflicts massive pain or massive damage, and is exciting while doing it. He understood that there had to be an excitement factor. And here we're seeing Tyson's footwork and just how much he could change angles and cover distance. Look at this. He wasn't squared off like people believe. His back foot was pointed out, and he would use that to just generate incredible power, close the gap, and bam, bam, hit you without getting hit in return. And he was a giant killer. He would just take out huge fighters. And so here we have Hadley right here, and you can see how peekaboo boxing can be done by the taller fighter if you focus on the jab as your primary tool. So peekaboo boxing, a big misconception about it is that it's not a jab-heavy system. It is a very jab-heavy system, in fact. Tyson was heavily, effective with his jab, especially in his earlier fights, and he would use that to generate a lot of movement from the other guys so that they would counter, and then he would just slip to the inside and throw that hook or that uppercut. That was really his power tool. He would slip to the outside, get low, and that generates the leverage to throw that uppercut with pure power. As you can see right there, once you duck to the ground, Tyson always said, I'm going to use my body type against the other person. So he said that if the average heavyweight is 6'2", 6'3", he's much smaller than that. He was around 5'10", 5'11". They're not used to fighting his body type. He is used to fighting the bigger guy. And that's something that actually is misunderstood a lot also for street fighting. Your body type is almost never a disadvantage. The only real disadvantage you can have is weight. Obviously, if you're fighting someone who's 200 pounds heavier than you, or whatever size they are, 100 pounds heavier than you, that's an advantage for them because they're going to hit harder and they're going to have more mass behind them. If they take you to the ground, they're going to be harder to move. It is a massive disadvantage. But height in itself, when there's no weight differential, is not as much of an advantage as people think, because you can use your body type to the best ability. And within that, even within grappling, within striking, there are advantages to being the smaller, more compact tank fighter. And as long as you fight for your body type, which is, again, having a great coach like Customato can teach you to do that, you will be able to be effective. It's a huge misconception that, like, oh, the tallest guy always wins. No, usually the heavier guy has a massive advantage, but that doesn't mean that the taller guy always wins. As we see from Mike Tyson, he would just slip to the outside and he'd come back with a super hard look at all the misses here. So this is one of the best series in boxing history, in my opinion. We'll see it again. Look at all these slips before he even decides to counter, and it takes him one shot. Now, the interesting thing about Tyson is not bobbing and weaving reactively. He's bobbing and weaving actively. And this is another benefit of peekaboo boxing. Something very special about peekaboo boxing. So I talk about this a lot. You don't want to be reactive in a fight. You want to be active. What do I mean by that? If someone starts a fight with you and you're the victim and they're the aggressor, they have the advantage, I've talked about this before, of being the bully, which means they are active and you are reactive. When they hit you, they are choosing to hit you. You're not choosing to defend. You have to defend. You are reacting to a physical movement. And whenever you react to a physical movement, you are by nature at a disadvantage. It's why counterfighting is such an advanced form of fighting. You look at some of the best boxers that are counterfighters, counterboxers. I don't recommend that as a street system. It's very hard to develop those reflexes. And those reflexes, by the way, get diminished over time. Your ability to have incredible timing and reflexes slows down with age. So even when I'm teaching fighting, I always talk about variables. In a street fight, you cannot get hit. It's not like you can be in a boxing match and eat one and hope it doesn't drop you and then say, well, there's a ref there to break it up, or I know for a fact they don't have a friend who's going to come stomp my head. No, in a street situation, you have no variable that you cannot take into account, meaning there is no risk that you can take. You can't say I'm going to keep my hands low and slip and play around, because if you get caught even once and it manages to drop you, that could mean your life is over. That could mean they're stomping on your head. And so the risk to reward is different than in a boxing fight. And it's why styles like peekaboo boxing, specifically peekaboo boxing, translates so well for street fighting. Because again, what I was talking about, action, reaction, you want to always be active in a fight. I don't want to have to worry about what you do. When you jab at me, when you cross at me, when you throw a hook, I don't want to have to be able to read what you just threw and react to that specific motion. I want to have a response that I know deals with all of it. It's, again, why I teach the rhino so much, because if I close distance, if I go from here right into your face, I don't care, and I protect my head in that moment, and I do it explosively and fast, I don't really care what you threw. I don't care if you throw a cross, a jab, a hook that comes around the side. I don't care if you throw a body shot, because the punch is being thrown to hit me here. I'm going to be all the way over here by the time it hits me. Okay, so it's past me. And in the process, I'm kind of hugging and protecting as much as possible. I don't have to worry about countering. I have to worry about being active, not reactive. And peekaboo boxing, and Tyson specifically, was a very active fighter. His head was always moving preemptively. He was always covering distance preemptively. And he was always weaving and countering with, and when I say countering, he didn't care what you threw. He would weave to the outside, and he would slip that, and then he would hit with the body shot, the uppercut, or the hook. And then he'd slip out again, follow up from there, and just keep hitting. In other words, it was almost formulaic what he would do. It's why all these knockouts are coming from initially that left hook or that left uppercut. The interesting thing about Tyson, which is super, super fascinating, is that he stepped to outside power. If you look, he's stepping to people's right hands. Now, in fighting, typically, if you look at like most boxing, they tell you not to step into people's power hand. You don't want to circle to your left. You'll be circling into their right. And their right hand, this hand right here, is their power punch. And so when you step in that direction, you're stepping, bam, to get caught into that power punch. But Tyson, what was so amazing about him is his ability to step to the outside of your power punch. He could angle his body in such a way where he was so tucked and he would slip so tight and he was so covered up that it didn't matter if you were trying to hit him with the cross. He was already on the outside. It's a Filipino principle. Again, I talk about it, fighting half the man. It's a great self-defense principle where you fight on the outside of someone's power. Because if they're used to hitting you with the right hand and they throw it, this is the line. If you were already here, tighten, and I brought this back, it wouldn't matter. You would still be on an angle that I could not hurt you unless I turned into that angle. And as I turn into that angle, you are waiting, like Mike Tyson, with the most beautiful hook or the most beautiful uppercut to come catch me. And again, that is something that he did better than anyone. Truly better than anyone. And you see it here on the heavy bag. He never slips without following up with a strike. And this is the part where you see just how effective his jab is. So this is going to be a lot of footage of his jab right here. And we'll really learn just how effective that jab was. He said it was a blinder for the fighter to experience his jab. He would put it in your face to blind you so that he could cover that gap, cover that distance, and then crack you with a super powerful punch. And again, these are, a lot of people say, well, the reason that, peekaboo boxing was so popular back then was because of Tyson, but you need a certain physical capability to do it. I disagree. Of all the styles of boxing that kind of teach you a formulaic way to just protect your head, close the distance, and hurt somebody, which is exactly what you want in a street fight, I think that peekaboo boxing is the ultimate expression of that. And so to just dismiss it because there haven't been so many greats since Tyson who used peekaboo as a style, there you go. He's circling to the outside. See how he's explaining? I'm circling away from the power hand. Even if you throw it, I'm on the outside. I'm too close. And again, if you do that at range, it doesn't work. But if you do it close, damn, ultimate, beautiful expression of that again. And so I'm so blown away every time I see his movement. It just inspires me. It gets like this rage within me because like another thing about martial artists and why I think Tyson is a special martial artist is because a lot of people say that martial arts and fighting are two different things. There's also the person and the character. And when you look at Mike Tyson, he had a really rough upbringing. Like I said, at 12 years old, he's taken in by cuss. This guy didn't really have his own family. He spent his whole life fighting. He was on the streets, rough upbringing. And then he's taken advantage of when his father figure dies. He's taken advantage of by a guy who's one of the most vile people in the world and just had a really, really hard life, did some bad things, obviously, and was heavily criticized, had explosions of anger. And one of the things in martial arts that I think is necessary is being able to evolve, not just as a fighter, but as a person. And something about Mike Tyson is that he truly evolved as a person. He is one of the most self-reflective people when you watch his podcast, when you watch him talk, when you watch him discuss his past self. And even in different stages, it's not like he got to a point and he stopped. Him 5 years ago is different than him today. Even when he got back into fighting, He did it from a healthy place. He used to kind of break down on the Rogan show and on his podcast about doesn't want to be kind of a monster anymore, how it brings out something in him. And he found a way to do it and get back into boxing in a healthy way mentally. And you have to respect someone as a martial artist who can do that, who can not just have the warrior side where you are just this vicious dog of war who goes in and destroys, which Tyson had better than anyone, but also can evolve as a human being and become a coach, can become a mentor, can inspire people. Tyson has started doing that for many years now for people. And I think that seeing that evolution of him as a person is almost more impressive in many ways than him as a fighter, which is a crazy thing to say, because to me, he's one of the most impressive fighters in the world. So I hope you liked this video. I hope you picked up some tips and tricks. I just really wanted to show the footage of just how wonderful Tyson was and why, because again, people oversimplify peekaboo boxing as a system. They oversimplify boxing as a martial art. They say it's not a martial art, but then within that, to look at peekaboo boxing and not see the incredible benefits that you can implement into your self-defense tools. Just the basic concepts of cover distance, hands protecting high, constant head movement. Now, I wouldn't necessarily recommend getting as low as Tyson. You might get kneed in the head in a street fight, but if you're covering distance like he can, forget about it. Ain't happening. But to the average person like us, where we're not going to be able to cover distance that fast, there are ways to modify what we just saw to bring it into your training and make it incredibly effective. Like I said, go from here to here. And even from here, move your head. See? My head is moving like crazy. I know it looks stupid, but you're not catching me there, especially if I'm closing in. All those peekaboo principles. Every time you create an angle, every time you cover up and create an angle and you go off center. So here's the camera. This is where you don't want to leave your head in a street fight. Okay? We're looking at each other now. We're face to face. Anytime you create an angle, when you come back, use that leverage to damage. I don't care if it's a hook, an elbow. I don't care if it's an elbow here. Use that angle back to damage. This is a great lesson from peekaboo boxing. And then it brings you across to the other side. Use that angle. Use the angles you are given constantly to keep moving and keep damaging. Another guy who did this incredibly well is Remen Dekkers, who's another incredible fighter, Dutch kickboxer, went to Thailand, did incredible things. But it's the cyclone. I said this before, tornadoes, but tornadoes don't turn. They turn completely. I'm talking about kind of a whipping motion. Okay, anytime you create leverage in one angle, take advantage of it as you come back. And don't come back right in front of the guy and stop here. Go all the way to the next angle. And again, that is a peekaboo boxing principle, which applies so well to self-defense. Does not leave openings, does not leave counters. And again, the nice thing about peekaboo boxing, if you're fighting multiple people, is that when you get close to someone, you cut that angle to the outside of them, you hit them, they become a shield because now they're here. I cannot get hit by this person anymore. I've cut the angle on the side, but not only can I not get hit by this person, I can't get hit by all the people now around them because they're in the way. I'm too close to them. And if I keep moving, it creates a very, very hard line of attack for additional people to come hit me. I'm not static. And so again, I hope you learned a lot watching this. I hope you gained an appreciation for Mike Tyson if you didn't have one, which I'm sure many of you who are martial artists out there already love Mike Tyson. Please like and subscribe to this channel. Give me recommendations. I know this isn't one of the recommendations, but I just really wanted to talk about Mike Tyson. I get excited when I see footage of him. And yeah, that's all I got to say today. Thanks for watching, guys.